We got 7 different stories from 7 different media outlets, you guys. It is time for another episode of Regan's Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of Regan's Newsround, where I cover seven different stories from 7 different media news outlets here. Roughly around about an hour, more or less. And we start here with The Guardian, with the headline that the UK is to have its first parliament in modern history with the fall of living standards, says a think tank. Household incomes are on course to fall despite national insurance cuts in budget, says the Resolution Foundation. We're going to be looking at an article basically highlighting all the changes that have been made in the budget shortly, but this headline in itself, just from one think tank, now obviously it will take a few days still before really when people really try to dig deep into the nooks and crannies of the budget. And obviously, as you guys know, I'm not exactly the most knowledgeable when it comes to economics and whatnot, but when already you're hearing that people are saying that this budget's not going to make a difference, that this budget is not, people's lives haven't changed for the better, and when you're having even a think tank saying that, living standards are going to fall even more, it's not good. It's pretty depressing, pretty deplorable. And the one thing, as I sat and was listening to this budget, and all I was just thinking about public services. Please do something about public services. And just nothing came. Nothing came. And, people... I would say the opposite, that people don't want tax cuts. People want investment in public services. People want something done, want more money in their pocket, essentially. People want better wages. People want... There's so many things people want and they're just not getting with this Conservative government. And it really does feel like a sham. It felt like a real damp squid listening to the budget. But just on this itself, highlighting the falling living standards, it's a horrible situation. Because people are already out there struggling. You probably listening to this, are probably struggling. Just to make ends meet, just to get on by, just to survive. You're not living, you're surviving. You're scraping the barrel to get from one day to the next. You're scraping of where you're going to find your next meal, or when your child's going to find your next meal. These tiny little things add up. And now the fact that there's potential that our living standards could fall even more before the next general election, it's just a horrible, horrible situation to say the least, guys. It really, really is. So household incomes are on course to fall for the first time in over the course of a parliament, despite Jeremy Hunt's national insurance cut. The Resolution Foundation think tank said in its assessment of the Chancellor's budget. Amid almost 2 decades of falling real wages, the foundation said that after adjusting for inflation, household disposable incomes were poised to fall by 0.9% between 2019 and the end of 2024. The first parliament in modern history to see a fall in living standards. That is horrible. That's really bad. The foundation said Hunt's likely last budget before the general election delivered on Wednesday showed that this has been a parliament of flatlining growth, falling living standards and noticeable redistribution from the old and the rich to the young and the poor. So much waffle from Jeremy Hunt, just so much waffle. Analysis overnight by the foundation showed that a long period when tax policy was skewed to supporting older generations had come to an end, with Hunt targeting households headed by someone between age 18 and 45 with the biggest gains. The report said this group would benefit on average by £590 compared with the average loss of £770 for those aged 66 and over. Torsten Bell, the chief executive of the Resolution Foundation, said the Chancellor had constructed a budget that offered a £9 billion tax reduction before a general election expected this year, but with £19 billion of tax rises to follow in subsequent years. In its assessment of public finances, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the Treasury official forecaster, said the budget had increased borrowing to pay for most of these tax cuts, using up all of the £13 billion reduction in borrowing cost. All for these tax cuts that nobody wants or needs. Well, maybe a few rich people that, might want them, but there's nobody really out there saying we want tax cuts. In the November autumn statement, Hunt left himself a £13 billion for contingencies at the end of his 5-year plan. In the spring budget, this was reduced to $9 billion. Dell said a pre-election budget produced another round of pre-election tax cuts. To deliver them, the Chancellor has continued to throw fiscal caution to the wind, cutting his fiscal headroom to just a third of the average levels seen since 2010. He will fail to meet these 3 out of 4 sets of fiscal rules used by the Conservative predecessors since 2010. On Thursday, Hunt told the BBC Radio 4 Today programme that he wanted to make a start on bringing down taxes, but I never said for one moment that I can bring them down all in one go. The Chancellor added that higher taxes were necessary to help pay for the furlough scheme during the pandemic and the cost of living support to reduce the impact of rising energy prices. Well, he's not done anything yet. Well, it's all well and good this talking about, oh, we've got to pay back these debts, but what about people who can't even make ends meet? There's a stagnation in the economy right now. And how is this a priority right now when people are seriously struggling? We've got a healthcare system right now that's not functioning, which means that we have a huge proportion of our workforce who can't work because they can't get the healthcare they need as well. And what's being done? Nothing. Nothing is being done. It's just sitting there. People are sitting there, forced to go on benefits because they don't want to be on benefits, who want to work and they can't work. And this guy doesn't have a clue, in my opinion, about things. I mean, even I'm not that smart when it comes to numbers and whatnot. But what I do know is that our public services are really poor right now. People are struggling right now to make ends meet. I've seen it online. I've seen it in person. People. It's not working right now for people. There's been so much anger, from this Conservative government, and you would have thought with this budget that this would be a chance for them to kind of show a little something, and they've given a tiny bits of scrap to people, tiny scraps. But while they giving you tiny scraps, they're taking even more out of your pocket. Because the council tax rises, they're going to go up. No one's going to be able to capable. No one's going to struggle. Everyone's going to struggle to cope with them. Why is everyone paying more for less? That's not a fair society. In no way, shape or form. How is that a fair society? Please. How is that a fair society? Anyone who asked who the losers of the budget were, Hunt cited the scrapping of the non-dom tax status for wealthy foreigners and the windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Now, this was pointed out in the video from Phil from Different Bias, and he also made this clear in the budget. Let's be very clear. He has not scrapped the non-dom tax status. What he's done is that he's held it off. It's for the first 4 years they can basically get away with it, essentially. Then they'll pay. Then they don't. For the first 4 years, they don't have to pay the non-dom tax scales, and then after 4 years, they have to. The sort of thing. So it's not really got rid of. It's just been put on a timer for people. It's kind of what it is. Which kind of can mean that people after 4 years can kind of just move out and then move back in, I suppose, or something like that. I don't buy this thing at all, to be fair. I mean, he says he's scrapping it, but the details is what we don't see. The Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said Hunt needs to explain where the money is going to come from to abolish national insurance. She told BBC Breakfast yesterday at the end of the budget that the Chancellor started floating his idea and he was going to get rid of the national insurance altogether. I don't approve of this at all. I think national insurance is really important. I think it's a really important tax, and I don't agree with this premise at all. I think we need it. Yes, it and among other taxes still go into the Treasury pot, but I still think it's a very important tax that we need to keep. So I hope that if it does get rid of that, Labour would introduce something similar or different or revive it. Well, that would cost 46 billion. Or I'd like to know where that money is going to come from, because I wouldn't make a promise like that without being able to say where the money is going to come from. I think it's incumbent on politicians to be honest about the trade-offs that has to be made. The Resolution Foundation said there was good news for middle earners and younger people, which meant taxpayers earning below 26,000 or over 60,000 would lose out. The biggest group of losers are pensioners, who face an 8 billion collective hit, he added. Dell said, look at all the policy changes announced. The Parliament reinforces the sense that the government has reversed course from the approach that dominated during 2010. Back then, support was focused on pensioners and take away on the poorer, younger households. This time, it is those aged 65 on the highest incomes who are set to lose the most. Bell was critical of the government's reliance on its cuts to public service over the next 5 years to fund some of its tax cuts. The 19 billion of cuts to unprotected public services after the next election are 3/4 of the size of those delivered in early 2010. The idea that such cuts can be delivered in the face of already faltering public services is a physical fiction, he said. And this is the thing. Like, I just don't. These tax cuts are just. It's just to enrich themselves. It really is so insulting, guys. It really, really is insulting that, when we are already struggling as it is, and tax cuts are not going to make a difference to people. It really, really is not, especially on the lower end. We've said this before. Some middle income earners may be a little bit better off, but they're still taking a slice of your hand that you don't see. Form of a stealth tax, as Labour like to put it as well. A lot of the budget was a lot of waffle, to be fair, guys. Which is why we're going to be looking at some of the main points here from Sky News. So, key announcements in the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt speech. So, here are all the main points outlined by Jeremy Hunt to MPs as part of what is expected in the final budget before the election. So, here are some of the things. So, taxes, national insurance contribution for employees are being cut from 10% to 8% from April, impacting about 27 million workers with savings of up to £450 a year. To those who contribute to national insurance, they're going to be saving themselves some money, but it also means that less money is going to be in the coffers as well. Self-employed national insurance rates will drop by 2% as well. Higher rate of property tax, capital gains tax will be reduced from 28% to 24%. The non-tom tax status has been abolished. Like I said, it hasn't been abolished technically, it's just been put on a timer. It means foreign nationals who live in the UK but are officially domesticated overseas will no longer be able to avoid paying UK tax on their overseas income or capital gains. A simpler residency-based system will arrive in 2025. They have a 4-year period before that as well. Stamp duty relief for people who purchase more than one dwelling in a single transaction, known as multiple dwelling relief, is scrapped as well. The furnished holiday letting regime has been abolished because it creates a distortion, meaning there is not enough properties available for long-term rental by local people. Air passenger duty will be raised for non-economy class plane passengers. And the energy profits levy, a windfall tax on UK produced oil and gas, is extended to 2029. Not really too much on them, to be fair, when it comes to taxes. Like I say, I'm not somebody who really has a great fundamental understanding of taxes, and it's something that I am still learning about. If I'm absolutely honest, some of you guys probably listening to this are far more knowledgeable about taxes than I am. So feel free to enlighten me in the comments on taxes, guys. Benefits, benefits. Is people are already, people who are already stuck on the dole. There are obviously those people who choose not to work and contribute to society are a problem. There is a proportion of that in all aspects of life, but the vast majority of people, I would say, want to work but can't work because of many, many reasons, i.e. one of them are a crumbling healthcare system. So the high income child benefit change, which hits payment if one parent earns above £50,000 a year, is to move to a household-based system. The household will rise to £60,000 from April. In the meantime, on top of the taper where it is withdrawn, is raised to £80,000. So it's more based on those within the household rather than just one person on that. But one of the things with child benefit claim is that at the moment many companies many childcare places are struggling as it is to basically run, struggling with income and whatnot. Unless you are a wealthy person, a really well-off person, or you have grandparents that can look after your kids and you don't need to rely on this. So if you're somebody who needs to have childcare taken by whether it's the state or private or whatnot, it's a struggle for these companies. They don't get enough money. Like I said, I know family members within childcare, and it's a struggle for them. The Household Support Fund is extended for a further 6 months. The £90 charge to get debt relief border is abolished. Repayment periods for people on low incomes who take out new budget advance loans will increase from 12 months to 24 months. It just feels like that's kind of just like kicking the can. Things like that just feels like a kicking the can down the road sort of thing to something that's, to me. A new British ISA which will allow a £5,000 annual investment into UK businesses. It includes all the tax advantage of other ISAs and will be on top of an existing allowance. How is this beneficial when there are plenty of ISAs out there? If someone wants to explain this in a bit more detail, please feel free to do so. To help people save, a new British saving pound delivered through the NS&I will offer a guaranteed rate fix for 3 years. Tobacco and vaping. Duty will be introduced on vaping liquids for the first time in October 2026. A one-off increase in tobacco duty will be made at the same time. I have no issue with this. I think the changes that they are making in tobacco, and obviously you would rather people who are addicted to smoking, you would rather vape, have them doing vaping or vaping liquid or whichever two, rather than smoking in terms of their health. But like I say with smoking, like it's for me, smoking is no different than drinking alcohol. For me, that's the premise that I see it, and I think if you're treating, it's a luxury. It's a luxury item, and it's not really one that's going to make the masses of differences. And I feel like it's just a kind of like they're looking like they're trimming the edges of a policy that, in my opinion, is not necessary. In my opinion, the outright banning of smoking, I think, is a silly one, and I generally hope that I actually mean this. I generally hope that the Labour Party U-turn this idea of outright banning smoking in the UK. I don't think it should be outright illegal. I still think it's fine to have it quite expensive for people to buy. And same with vaping and vaping liquids. And I think a duty is nothing wrong with a duty for the vaping liquids. Yes, make them expensive, but don't outright ban them. Don't give smugglers a black market. For smoking. They already have enough of that within many drugs as it is. So if there's money going to be made in there, let it be made within our economy and not on the black market. Is the message that I have there. Alcohol duty freeze has been extended until February 2025. But Hunt said the government wants to back British pubs. Yeah, it's funny that it's like 14. In the last 14 years, how many? Let's have a look a second, guys. Before, how many? Let's have a look. How many pubs? How many pubs do you guys think actually have closed in the UK since 2010? What do you guys think? Since 2010, how many pubs, guys? Do you want to think? Do you want to guess? Yeah, because they said they're back pubs. Yeah. Let's see what the good old Google says. So it says here in the UK, 8,800 pubs closed between. No, that's not right. That's the wrong. That's not. That's 1980 and 2000. No, that's not good. Let's see. There's an article here. 50 pubs closing every month as numbers hit record low. That's from Restaurant Online. Restaurant Online here. I'm just going to have a quick gauge here. This was last year on October 22nd. I don't know how well you guys can see this. I'm just going to I'm going to go to my free cam for you guys so you can have a look here. Go away for a second. No, why? Let's have a quick look here. 50 pubs closing every month as numbers hit record low. That's October 10th, 2022, right? That's just one. The number of pubs closing across England and Wales has hit a rate of 50 a month. 50 a month. Data from real estate advisor Altus Groups revealed that a number of pubs closing permanently have risen by 50% over the past 3 months as businesses struggle with the rising costs and bills. During the 3 months to the end of September 22, Atlas Analysis of Government Property Record Tax shows that 150 pubs were either demolished or converted into types of use such as homes and offices. This number is up 50% on the 200 pubs that is closed for good during the first 6 months of 2022. This is just 2022, by the way. Wales and the north of England were the hardest hit in terms of numbers closures. The total number of pubs, including those vacant, are being offered to let, fell below 40,000 for the first time to 39,973 at the end of June, compared to 40,173 at the end of 2021 calendar year. With pubs struggling and soaring costs and fragility consumer confidence, Roger Henry, UK president of Atlas Group, described last month's mini-budget as containing glorious omissions. It beggars belief that this self-proclaimed low-tax government could allow pubs to lose their businesses rates at discount next year, as well as seeing any benefits on next year's revaluation, potential wipeout by inflation, he said. Last month, pub giant JD Wetherspoons announced it was putting 32 of its pubs up for sale for commercial reasons as well. So even that, on top of that, guys, so even that was speaks volume. But like they said here, guys, the government, Hunt says the government wants to back British pubs, back British pubs, and I would say to those who, there are. There's a YouTuber I'm going to put in the link in the description. You can check him out as well, who goes around to cities to see the boarded up high streets and whatnot, and how to see high streets around up and down the UK, and to give an example of just how bad things are in terms of our high street. And there are lots of pubs boarded up that used to exist that no longer exist, and It's pretty grim, It's for me, the thing about alcohol and pubs. One of my biggest gripes that I have with this is that British pubs are so important and so valuable, and while I'm glad that many of them are able to keep going because they've converted into pubs and restaurants, which is great, that allows them to keep going as a business, and I think that's really that's good. But obviously those who just want to remain as just a place for drink, and socialising, that's also really important. But for me, the biggest headache I have is the supermarkets, the convenience stores that are able to that have alcohol, that sells alcohol in cans at such cheap rates. For me, that's the biggest problem. For me, it should be the opposite. It should be pubs should have much cheaper value for alcohol in comparison to supermarkets. Supermarkets and convenience stores should have much more expensive booze. Much more expensive. It should be all much more expensive, and it should be dirt cheap. You switch that around. You make it dirt cheap in pubs. You make it cheaper in pubs and restaurants and whatnot. You know what that does? That encourages more people to go out. If you can make them cheaper there and make it more expensive to drink and that at home, I think that does a world of good. But obviously, how you go about and doing that, I'm not 100%, but that's my premise, because I believe that pubs should have much cheaper alcohol than in the supermarket, just flat out. But that's my general premise, because that will encourage more people to go to the pubs than sitting at home with a can of beer watching the football. But there you go. Anyway, I thought you found that a little bit interesting about that. Fuel duty, I am useless when it comes to fuel, considering that I don't have a driving license and I don't drive. No change to the fuel duty, with 5p cut announced in March 2022 still in place. I will say, obviously, in terms of electric cars, More needs to be done to encourage people to switch to electric. More charger points, EV charger points. More needs to be done to make it simpler, the system simpler for people. If you want to encourage people, you need to simplify it and give incentives for people to switch from fuel to electric. So if we want to go down that market, if we want to go green in terms of that kind of stuff, we need to have more ways of encouraging people less on fuel and more on electric cars. I know some car companies are doing that, but I feel that the government needs to do more to incentivize people to do that. So business support. So full expansioning for businesses will apply to leases access in future when affordable. Draft bill to be published shortly. Okay. VAT registration threshold for businesses up from £85,000 to £9,000. Eligible film studios in England will secure a 40% relief on their gross business rate until 2034. Tax relief made permanent at 45% for touring and ostracical productions and 40% for non-touring productions. Small little tweaks here and there, nothing that's really, in my opinion, going to make much of a difference for businesses. We know that obviously businesses are struggling when it comes to the trade deals that we have with our EU. We need to do something about that when we need to look at how we can reduce the red tape and make it easier for relations between ourselves and the EU. We also need to look at the trade deals. The trade deals that we currently have made since we left the European Union haven't exactly been within the best interests of the UK, such as New Zealand and Australia, for example. I know obviously there's still extended talks between the UK and India about securing a possible trade deal there. But we do need to either enhance or re-secure trade deals that we don't have around the world, while we at the same time also looking to loosen the trade barriers that we've imposed on ourselves since leaving the European Union. So those are challenges that I think are not helping, among many other things that businesses are struggling with right now. Obviously, the energy bills that some of them accumulate as well is also suffering and having a major impact on them as well. So small things, but again, it's not major stuff really. The economy. So the Office of Budget Responsibility predicts UK GDP growth of 0.8%. 0.7% in 2024 and 1.9%, 1.4% in 2025. Figures in the brackets of the OBR's predictions last November. So the growth, we need, obviously growth is something that the country that the country needs, but we've been flatlined for quite a long time now. So he's not really done enough. That this Conservatives have not done anything enough to grow the economy, as they keep saying. Office of Budget Responsibility expects Treasury borrowing of 91.7% of GDP. That's 91.6% in 2024-2025, 92.8% there, 92.7% in 2025-2026. Figures in brackets are OBR predictions for last November. So that's the predictions that the OBR are making. The Office of Budget Responsibility sees inflation coming in below target within months as well. So yes, it's great that inflation has reduced, but obviously that does not mean that prices on the shelf. That does not mean that things are going to be cheaper. No, it just means that price rises and whatnot are going to be going to be a bit less. But inflation coming down is a good thing, but it's not something that people are really. It's not making a difference to people's lives right now. So the NHS is to get an additional £2.5 billion this year to tackle issues including the waiting list, and the planned growth in day-to-day public sector spending to be maintained in 1% in real terms. But Mr Hunt said we are going to spend it better, including fund the NHS productivity plan in full to boost digital transformation. So just on this itself, so I will put this positive perspective into it. So I welcome the use of more technology being used in our National Healthcare Service. I welcome the use of an NHS app that allows people to connect to their health service and doctors more. I think these are good things, and I think they're very helpful things. And I think those, in terms of using technology and AI and stuff, to integrate, when it comes to our healthcare, I think is actually a good thing, and I think it's an important thing. That will allow patients and people to connect better to your healthcare service. I welcome that. I welcome the advancement of use of technology and digital stuff. However, is this going to make a difference to the backlog? No, this is not going to make a difference to the backlog. This is not. It's not really making the massive differences. These kind of stuff that we're talking about, the use of these kind of stuff is yes, slowly integrate them in and sort of things, but obviously these are long-term things that will help doing that. But I would say you'd be much better doing that when you don't have a massive backlog, because then you're able to integrate changes to the NHS without having them running around like headless chickens doing 60, 80, 90 plus hours a week trying to get to every single person that they possibly can, because that's where the NHS is kind of at right now. Absolutely overwhelmed, still overwhelmed, but we don't talk about it because it's a normal convenience, really. So while I welcome more digital technology and that to kind of help mitigate some of the issues that the NHS has, this is not something that's going to tackle some of the main issues with it. But in terms of the budget overall, and as I've said before, guys, I'm not very knowledgeable with this kind of stuff. Based on what I've listened to from other YouTubers and some analysis from Sky, Channel 4, and some come to the conclusion that it's not really made a ton of difference. Martin Lewis has said there's been one or two good things from it, but overall, it's not really going to make a difference to people's lives. I don't feel better off. I don't think people listening to it feel better off. It's interesting listening. I was watching No Justice for a bit as well last night as well. Her live stream where she was looking at GB News was doing like an audience place where they were talking about the budget, and the audience members there, none of them were really kind of impressed with the budget at all. There wasn't really anyone there. The engagement I could see, I wasn't in the live stream for maybe about 20 minutes. I think I was watching it. But in the engagement in there, just felt like these are like older white people in a certain town in northeast of England. I can't remember the town's name, so someone probably will tell me. But it just they did not find themselves impressed in any way, shape, or form by the Conservatives and by Jeremy Hunt's speech. What was more impressive was actually Keir Starmer's speech. I thought Keir Starmer's speech was phenomenal, and I recommend going your way out to check out the speech from Keir Starmer, because he really did hammer the nail in the coffin. There had some good jibes as well, some really, really good jibes on promises that were made before and promises made again. I'm not going to do a separate video on the budget. It's not really my kind of thing, but there's plenty of people who have analysis. But I hope you found my thoughts and that, from what to the best of my knowledge on this, helpful to you guys indeed. So with that, guys, we'll move on from the budget. But just before we do, if you can hit the like button, it'd be greatly appreciated. Share this across social media, guys. Share it across other social media platforms so more people are aware of the video. That helps boost the algorithm, obviously, with this video, and obviously brings more people towards the channel. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel. Really does help. Really does greatly appreciate it, guys, because we are not far away from that 1,000 subscriber count, but there's still a lot of people who watch my content but don't subscribe to my content. So please consider subscribing. Help me get to that 1,000 mark. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. So this next one, guys, is a short one. It is quite a short one, but I do think it's I've talked about this issue before. But it's from the BBC. Judges pledge to surge rape cases to cut the backlogs, guys. So the backlogs are going back. So some of the cases are going back. So I've covered this in other articles. I think it was in Byline Times where I covered this, where some of the cases of some of these rape cases are going back as far as having back as long as a wait as possibly 5 to 5.5 years. Now just imagine, just stop and take that in for a second, yeah? Someone who has been raped, and in order for their case to be heard, they have to wait sometimes up to 5 years or longer. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound in any way kind of justice whatsoever. Now it's all like it's all well and good judges saying they pledged to cut the backlogs, but this is also a government problem. And the reason why I say this is because a little thing we had called austerity, which involved a lot of cuts being made, which means that we have a lot less courts, which means we have a lot less workers, judges and barristers, and that's also not helped the situation as well. So that's contributed to the situation that we're in with this as well. And it should never have been cut. You know, it should never have been cut. There's lots of things that should not have been cut in terms of austerity. We should never have had austerity, but the fact that we have a situation where rape cases are taking forever to be processed, it's just like any other crime, guys. It just shows the pointlessness for some people of just wanting to report a crime now, because they feel absolutely helpless, because even if they report it to the police and go through all that process, signing paperwork and whatnot, the paperwork that is all done by police officers, because the paperwork behind it all is important. The fact that they have to wait a long time to have their case in court is very disheartening, to say the least, guys. So judges across England and Wales are to prioritise the longest delayed rape cases in a bid to end the anguished victim in a backlogs limbo. So the unprecedented move to surge resources into the oldest rape cases is an attempt by the judiciary to crack some of the worst court delays. So under the plan, 181 trials waiting more than 2 years to finish will go ahead by the end of July. The Lord Justice Idis, the judge in charge, said victims face unacceptable delays. Now, it says there 2 years, but I'm pretty sure its Byline Times have reported it was longer than that. So my understanding of this is to put cases like these that are dragging on, to put them at the front of the queue, to push to get them cleared, as opposed to cases happening straight away, sort of thing. As of January, there were 3,355 rape cases awaiting trial in England and Wales, with an average wait time for defendants on bail of 358 days. Those delays have been caused by a combination of the pandemic, government cuts before it, and a strike by barristers over pay. So there's no question the pandemic played a major... we have to take that into account, that the pandemic played a major factor into that because you can't really do court cases sort of thing online. It's a bit near to next impossible to do that. So it's understandable that played a massive hampering in terms of cases as well. But like they've highlighted here, the BBC, which is kind of surprising considering how biased they are, they have highlighted that the government cuts, which is what I said about austerity, can contribute to it. And the strikes by barristers over pay, obviously, whether you agree or disagree, I think it was disagree on the pay. I think it was important that they get a fair pay, and they haven't been got. They are ones that don't get talked about. They didn't get They haven't had a real terms pay rise for a very long time. I think even as far back as even Labour government, that's been their issue. So in practice, the average wait time for rape trials is far longer than some defendants and victims, and 6% of the cases have been in the list since December 2021. Lord Justice Iris, who coordinates the Crown Court, said those 181 cases would now be prioritised to go before a jury by the end of July to end a significant injustice for both defenders and complainants. That means that in many courts, other trials would have to be rescheduled, but a senior judge said that the strategy would help cut delays overall. This is an unacceptable state of affairs from a point of view of the complainants, the witnesses, the defendants, and justice generally, said the senior judge. It's a small proportion of the total number of rape cases that we have to deal with that ends up getting this old, but nonetheless it's a significant injustice. The system has recovered its capacity. We're now in a position to make some choices, but we are not in a hand-to-mouth crisis. The 181 affected cases have been delayed because of factors including problems retrieving evidence from mobile phones, retrials, and in some cases lack of barristers and judges. 2 of the 181 cases may never be completed amidst suspicion that one defendant could have gone on the run and another might have died abroad. Once the cases are cleared, the plan is to repeat the exercise within the next oldest cohort of rape cases, further pushing down the average waiting time. The concept could be applied to other complicated, long-delayed offences such as fraud. The plan comes weeks after the Criminal Bar Association said that 6 out of 10 barristers who conducted rape and sexual violence cases could walk away from the work because of the poor pay and high stress. Yeah, it's a very stressful job, understandably. Tanya Akin, KC, chair of the CBA, said, "We support initiatives like this that turn the spotlight onto the delays crisis blighting our criminal justice system. We simply do not have enough specialist counsels left to prosecute and defend these important cases. If the government is serious about prioritising rape cases, then it needs to urgently invest in a dedicated workforce who are specially trained in this work." Lord Justice Isis said, "Our system requires a substantial supply of skill and experience advocating in all our offensive categories, but nowhere more than rape and other serious sexual offences. They are a very valuable asset, and it's disappointing to read the survey, but I hope that the survey can be at the start of efforts to put the situation right, because we can't run the system without advocates." I generally hope that looking at this, for someone like the opposition leader Keir Starmer, someone who cares about justice, someone who worked in the criminal prosecution service, because of his history and his backlog, I generally believe, guys, that he will take this. He will have a serious soft spot for this, and will want to make sure that we have a very strong justice system, and that those who perpetrate and break the laws and that feel the full wrath of it, and I'm sure he will impose that on those who are going to cause those who look to break the law. I generally think that he will do that. There needs to be more investment in our criminal justice system, absolutely, no question. And obviously you need to encourage more, fairer pay and whatnot is definitely something that needs to be done as well. So I'm certainly more in favour of those things, that is for sure, guys. Speaking of Labour, there's an interesting exclusive that we got here from iNews, you guys. So the headline is, "Starmer must put public services ahead of tax cuts," a senior Labour MP Stella Creasy warns. So Labour's MP Stella Creasy urges Keir Starmer not to stick to Tory tax and let spend plans, but set out a long-term plan for public investment. Public investment is something that everyone wants and everybody needs. So like we said, obviously, when we were talking about in the budget, Labour have not been so open, I would say. I still stand on this position that obviously when a general election is called, when Labour's manifesto comes out, then we will kind of see exactly what their key priorities are when it comes to the general election, what they're going to be tackling, what they're going to be doing. That's going to be the key thing. I would say everything that you hear right now, take things with a pinch of salt, because when that manifesto comes, that's when that's when the eyeballs need to be on them, because as they're in opposition, they can kind of say whatever they want, because at the end of the day, they're not in government, they're not in power. You can scream and shout at Labour all you want, but they're not the ones who've been in power for 14 years. Whether they've opposed or worked with the government, they don't make the final decisions on anything. They don't. The Conservatives have had the numbers they need to make legislations, to make changes that they want. They've had that. So it's really important for people to emphasise that point as well. So Labour should not accept budget tax cuts implemented by the Tory government. So Keir Starmer has been warned by one of his senior backbench MPs. Stella Creasy, the Labour MP for Walthamstow, urged the party leader not to stick to Tory tax and spend plans, and instead set out a long-term plan for public investment. Yeah, we already. Jeremy Hunt expect to announce a 2p cut. Yeah, this is. Yep, don't worry about that. Starmer and Shadow Chancellor Reeves have said they are not planning to announce tax rises beyond the already unveiling by the party, which includes scrapping the non-dom tax loophole and removing the VAT exemption for private schools. This could leave the parties inheriting personal tax cuts set out by the Conservative government if Labour wins the next election, which would force a squeeze in public spending elsewhere. Creasy, a former Shadow Minister and Deputy Leadership contender, is a high-profile backbencher in Labour who is largely considered to represent the centrist arm of the party's movement. Warned that unaffordable tax cuts would be irresponsible. And she argued tax cuts offer a temporary reprise and put a long-term saving and investment projects above short-term handouts. In an opinion piece in the Creasy said pursuing tax cuts in the face of warning from, among others, the IMF, the Conservative economic offer, still revolves around Liz Truss's view of the opinion for Britain to be the bargain bin of the global economy. The International Monetary Fund has warned against further tax cuts in the UK, arguing that preserving public services and investment will require higher spending that is reflected in the current plans. Yeah. So we've said, so the IMF obviously warned Jeremy Hunt and that about against doing some kind of tax cuts, but he's still putting through tax cuts though. It's just his own way of doing it, basically. Creasy said Labour's aspirations to rebuild from the bottom up requires commitment over long term rather than short term vote winners. Social justice is not an inevitable consequence for Britain's future by virtue of simply beating the Tories party at the ballot box, they wrote. The public knows deep down tax cuts offer a temporary reprise at best from the Ministry of Broken Public Services and an uncertain world. She urges Starmer to promise to rebuild by putting our public and private infrastructure for the long term ahead of any short-term tax cuts. The Labour leader also promised to reset the UK's relationship with international allies, starting with Europe. Yep. I generally believe that relationships between us and many of our international partners as well as Europe, the relationships will be a lot better once the Conservatives are gone. There's been a lot, the attitude of some of the Conservatives towards some of our international partners have not been anywhere, shall we say, nice. Very argy-bargy, shall we say. And I think, I think Labour will reset relationships for the better when they come in. And the parties must pledge to reform and deliver sustainable public finances as well as help households. To reduce inequality, Labour should also tackle the financial regulations that mean for some personnel borrowing, which is worthwhile investment, for others the defining factor in their destitution, the author said. She added that Keir Starmer had been right to argue this country has had a sticking plaster politics for too long, with the Conservative Party in the electoral and economic doldrums. This can be Labour's winning movement. For this to last, Labour need to win the argument with the public sector that ensures they stick with them during the time it takes to make a difference, a future worth fighting for needs less fantasy and fatalism and more real talk. Yeah, it's a lot of feeble talk, like we said, from the Conservatives, but Labour need to be more clear about what they're going to do. The thing is it's obviously I understand they're worried about getting shot in the foot by certain right wing media press and whatnot. We know they oh, sorry about that. We know that that's going to be that the media is always going to have going to try and come after them in any way, shape or form. We know that's going to happen. Sorry, I'm just getting, because I made movement. Sorry guys, I've got just an issue here while I'm talking to you guys. So we know that there's going to be issues and whatnot, but we'll have to wait and see what Labour, when the general election is called, when the manifesto finally comes, guys. This is when we will see. We will see for certain where things are. So, guys, I'm going to take a little break from it. We've still got 3 articles to go through. I've gone much. Wow, I can't believe how quickly we've come through so far, guys. But anyway, we've got some real news on the actual budget from Broken News, guys. Have given us the actual some of the things planned for the budget. So we hope you guys enjoy this.
Welcome to Broken News. And to Westminster, where the Chancellor has been delivering the spring budget. While most Britons have been struggling with spiralling bills, a cost of living crisis and a general sense of utter fucking despair, many will be relieved to hear that everything is going rather well, actually. Our reporter has more.
Yes, Willie, as you say, there was great anticipation here in Parliament Square ahead of the final Conservative budget for 1,000 years. The Tory party says it's hoping that the too little too late budget could save them as many as 1 seat at the upcoming game of electoral wipeout. And Jeremy Hunt tried to do this by weirdly name-checking all the constituencies they're terrified of losing to Keir Starmer's centrist commies. One of the biggest announcements was that of the ending of so-called non-dom status, an idea pushed by the Labour Party for fucking ages. Senior Conservative sources that we've definitely not made up have told Broken News that stealing Labour's ideas shows that Labour's ideas are actually a big bag of shite. Showing more desperation than your husband who's been neglecting your marriage for years, and then when you find out he's been cheating on you with Diane from accounts the whole time, like some hilarious cliche from a bad film, and you chuck him out, he suggests giving it another go while blubbering at the front door, suitcases in the hand, whimpering, "Oh God, Linda, think about the kids!" The Chancellor cut national insurance by 2 pence, meaning that every year the average British worker can afford 2 extra chomp bars, a single finger of fudge, or half a Freddo. Well, Willie, there was one moment of controversy during the announcement of a freeze in fuel duty, which will save drivers about £50 a year. The Prime Minister was seen laughing loudly in the background. We think we know why. He wasn't laughing in horrible recollection of the sheer cringing horror of his own recent interview with Grazia magazine. No, in fact, Broken News has done the maths, and Mr. Sunak has so much fucking money, he earns interest of £50 roughly every 45 seconds, which is just objectively hilarious. Back to you.
A lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
Well, now you know where the budget is, where the budget truly lies, guys. And just a reminder, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to Larry and Paul's YouTube channel at Larry and Paul, guys. They are the ones who provide the broken news. If you've not heard broken news from me, you might hear it from 1 or 2 other YouTubers. Definitely worth subscribing and checking out their stuff. They do some fantastic stuff, guys. They really, really do. So just before we go to the next one, guys, and just a reminder for those who aren't, if you want to financially support me in the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Yes, just as little as 99p, guys. That really does help and make a difference, and it really does help financially support me, especially at the moment when at the moment, I'm still trying to find work. I know it's very frustrating for myself, but any financial support really does help. Really does help me. So if anyone can do, we greatly appreciate it. But you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, and that allows you access to custom emojis. Any comments you make on any of my videos, I do respond to them within a couple of days normally. So you always get a response from me for being a YouTube member as well. If you are $2.99 Snowflake Corporal, as they're called, you get early access to all my content. That means all the short sound videos that I normally do a couple of days in advance. Some of them, you get straight away early access to them as well. So that's what you get. You get early access for being a $2.99 member. So and also, in case that content was not enough for you here on the channel, you can also check out my Patreon and my Rumble content. Both links are in the description as well. So we are sticking with Labour with the next one, guys. So this one is from The Independent. Labour's fat-shaming row after Peter Mandelson tells Starmer to lose a few pounds. Yeah, I saw this and I was like, what is this all about? I mean, it's like, I don't know about you guys, but maybe it's just me, but I felt like Boris Johnson was someone who seemed like who had a bit more pounds maybe on than Keir Starmer. But I don't see anything unhealthy about Keir Starmer. It doesn't. At least that's not my perception. I don't see Keir Starmer in any way, shape, or form as an unhealthy person. So this is an interesting one to say the least. So Lord Mandelson told the How to Win an Election podcast that Rishi Sunak and the Labour leader could better present themselves to win over voters. Now, I'm not sure what he implies by Rishi Sunak there, but yeah, let's read what he actually had to say. So, West Street has hit back at Peter Mandelson's fat shaming after the former Labour spinner told Sir Keir Starmer to shed a few pounds. In all honesty, let me know in the comments or even the Premier chat. Do you honestly think that Keir Starmer is somebody that's... Do you consider Keir Starmer to be fat? In my opinion, I don't. I don't consider... He does not come across to me as someone who looks unhealthy. That's my perception of him. That's from my perception of him. He doesn't come across and appear to me as someone who is considered unhealthy. Now, there's a certain Conservative MP that we could point to that's considered unhealthy, but I'm not going to name names, but hey ho. So Lord Mandelson told the How to Win an Election podcast, so it's a podcast on how to win an election, right? That Rishi Sunak and the Labour leader could better present themselves to win over voters. Discussing the Prime Minister's notorious slim fit suits and skinny ties, the ex-Labour comms chief said they diminish him rather than expand him. This is Keir Starmer regularly plays footballs with his friends here. Yeah, I mean, if he's just, just looking at him there, I mean, obviously, I don't know how old that picture is, but, for someone that plays football, I don't think he seems someone that's not fit and healthy. And in a bid to be even-handed, Lord Mandelson said, I think Keir Starmer needs to shed a few pounds, and that would be an improvement. Ties and appearances are not unimportant, Lord Mandelson added. Asked about the comments, Mr. Streeting, Labour Health Secretary, he's not one that I like, to be fair, guys. And he said that it was against that kind of fat shaming. Mandelson critics point to his 1980s style choice, such as the decision to spot a bushy moustache there. That's one way people getting back at the Lord Mandelson. Peter Mandelson should know better, he added. Mr. Streeton told LBC, and let me tell you, we've seen the old paunch, a large or prominent belly, from Peter over the years, so people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Kind of have to agree there. His decision to criticise Sir Keir's appearance raised eyebrows, with critics online poking fun at his thick, bushy moustache in the 1980s. The comments will also surprise those who know Sir Keir as someone who regularly exercises. The mad football 61-year-old Labour leader takes part in a weekly football match. It's not the first time Lord Mandelson has offered Sir Keir unsolidary advice, and appear usually on the eve of Labour conference and join graduates Alistair Campbell and David Miliband in calling for him to set out a clearer policy platform to win voters' trust. At the time, Mr. Campbell, Tony Blair's former Director of Communications, told The Guardian, I sometimes worry that the Labour Party today doesn't. I don't often get that sense of sort of relentless, restless, obsessive attention of details focusing on everything that you need to focus on. Meanwhile, Lord Mandelson told the paper, I do think that the Labour Party under Sir Keir Starmer is ready for government. Well, actually, I don't. But then the election isn't going to take place tomorrow or the day after. They have another year. The figure added, I just implore people in Labour to realise not just that they shouldn't be complacent, but just how much detail, hard slog, and work is involved in preparing for the programme of government. If I'm absolutely honest, you guys know how I feel about Labour, and I'm very somebody who's not. I'm nowhere near considering myself a Labour person, but they know that they're going to be in an absolute crap bag when they go into government, regardless of what the state of the country is going to be now or whenever the general election is called. It's crap. We know it's crap. They know that. The country knows that. The people know that. Both the current government and this potential incoming Labour government, if they win the general election, know that. Everyone knows that. I think I think this is just like a couple of senior Labours who've had their time, who, like everything, times change, people change, sort of thing. So, and I know some, I know. I don't like these people saying, "No, maybe you guys should do this." Like, take some things on board, take the advice, but choose whether to want to listen to it or not is up to you. Not just a vision, but a program of government policies that flow from it that you have in place if you're going to hit the ground running on day one after the election. Last June, a shock report detailed Lord Mandelson's particularly close relationship with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. The dossier laid bare the senior political figure's ties to the late philanthropy, who was close enough to the former Labour cabinet minister to call him Petey. A report also suggests Lord Mandelson stayed in Epstein's New York home in June 2009, when he was still Gordon Brown's business secretary, and the financier was serving 18 months in prison for solidarity prosecution from a mirror. The internal JP Morgan Chase Project Jeep report from 2019, first reported on by the Financial Times, was filed to a New York court this week as part of a bank's tentative statements with some of Epstein's victims. He found that Epstein appears to maintain a particularly close relationship with Peter Andrew, the Duke of York, and Lord Peter Mandelson, a senior member of the British government. Lord Mandelson's spokesperson says he very much regrets the connection with Epstein. Does he now? I wonder why he regrets it now. It's just funny that he doesn't like to mention these things. Kind of wants to keep them under close pockets. Yeah, I think he should just shut up. If I'm absolutely honest. You're gonna, especially when you're talking about someone's weight, when you've got skeletons in your own goddamn closet. Maybe sometimes the best thing to do is sometimes the best thing to say, guys, is not say anything at all. And I hope that's the case with Mr. Peter here, guys. So we've got two more articles to go. So this next one here is from Open Democracy. It's an exclusive here from them. The exclusive reveals that the Met Police sacked just 5 firearm officers despite 2,000 complaints. Campaigners said the new data shows notorious gun squad officers act as law unto themselves. Once again, guys, we're talking about the issues that are within the Metropolitan Police and how goddamn bad they are, and it drives me up the freaking wall that they keep saying we're going to do reforms, we're going to do this, we're going to make these changes and whatnot, and nothing gets done. And it really does piss me off. It really does. I don't like using that word, but it really does. 2,000 complaints and only 5 firearm officers have been sacked. It's the system sucks. They're protected. The complaints just kind of like they're there. Okay, we'll let go the ones that we don't like the most. That's kind of what it reads to me, this exclusive. That's how I read it anyway. So more than 2,000 complaints and misconduct allegations have been made against the Metropolitan Police disgraced firearms squad in the past 6 years, but only 5 officers have been sacked. MO19 was one of 2 units given damning assessments in last year's Casey review, which was commissioned after Sarah Everard's rape and murder by serving Met Officer Wayne Couzens in 2021. And now new data obtained by Open Democracy lays bare the scale of the problem in the firearms unit, the department where Casey said normal rules do not seem to apply. Since when are proper rules applying to the police officers, police itself? We already know how institutionally racist it is, how messed up the police force, in particular here in England, it is. Our figures show that the Met received 1,807 complaints against firearm officers from members of the public between 2018 and November 2023. It launched 419 investigations, suggesting multiple complaints were made about some of the alleged incidences. So they had they received 1,800 complaints against firearm officers in the members of the public between 2018 and 2023, and it only launched 419 investigations. Suggesting multiple, So how many of them did they dismiss? I think is another question. The force received a further 209 allegations related to conduct matters, which are potentially disciplinary or criminal matters, usually flagged by colleagues. These led to 117 investigations. Public complaints are categorized vaguely. Okay, there were 570 relating to police powers, policies and procedures, 71 about individual behaviours, and 329 about oppressive and discriminatory behaviour. I guess the policy one, policy, police powers, and their procedures and the way they conduct themselves and needs as well. The Met's most common response to public complaints was to insist that the service provided was acceptable. Well, is it though? Is it though? You see, this is, how important are the body cams on police officers these days? I think they're really, really important to show that they are compliant with the law. I think that's something that should be more enforced. Only 73 were taken forward, of which only 7 resulted in formal action. 2 officers were sacked. The most common resolution is described as learning from reflection. What are they learning from reflection? With the conduct matters, 42 related to discreditable conduct, 30 were about repressive or discriminatory behaviour, and 13 regarded the use of force. Of the 209 cases, 45 led formal action taken, with 3 officers sacked. The exact number of officers in MO19 is not known, though in 2018 there were reported to be close to 850. Becca Hudston, the criminal justice researcher at Birkbeck University, said, "How can those who suffer mistreatment by police expect any justice when thousands of complaints land with us with just 5 officers taken off the street?" This is a very clear point. Every single complaint needs to be looked at, even if it's small, just to clarify things. Some obviously there are cases where some complaints are less serious than others, but they still need to be taken into account. She added, "Let me be clear, these are officers with lethal weapons. A relaxed attitude to misconduct here has serious consequences. When are we going to get this kind of institutional overhaul required to meet the scale of this problem?" The MO19 firearms unit had been involved in numerous scales in recent years, of which Everard's murder is the most recent. It was an officer from MO19, known only as Officer NX121, who shot and killed Chris Saber, a 24-year-old black man in southwest London in September 2022. After he was charged with the murder in September, colleagues in the unit downed their weapons in protest, leading Home Secretary Suella Braverman to speak out in support of them and commission a review into arms policing. This is the thing. While understandably police officers are looking out for each other, them in support of this who shot and killed Chris Saber in the end, who didn't need to kill this person. It's I don't want to go back into that case, guys, but them down in their weapons in protest and whatnot, it was it's very annoying, because a part of me is like, I understand police officers looking out for each other, brothers and sisters, that kind of thing, but when a police officer makes a mistake as big as this, and they should never happen, and they can happen, but they're very rare that they do, for them to say that for him to face the charges of murder and what he did, well, I'm sorry, but he shouldn't have done what he did. So again, I know it's a difficult situation, and I don't know what it's like to be a police officer. I understand it. Again, I understand the form of being united and together, but yeah, it's a difficult one. An officer from the unit under the previous title of CO19 shot and killed Mark Duggan in 2011, sparking the London riots. Deborah Coates, director of the charity Inquest, told Open Democracy that the new figures reinforce concerns about the toxic culture operating within the firearms unit and how racist, misogynistic and oppressive behaviour is not being addressed. We know about this. We've pointed this out time and time again. What's being done? Nothing. Again, nothing is being done. We've had these conversations time and time again on this channel, guys. I've covered extensive videos and articles bringing to you guys about how messed up our police force is, and again, they keep saying that they will learn from these mistakes, and they don't. They don't learn from these goddamn mistakes. I feel like I'm repeating when I talk about this stuff, but you know what? I am going to keep rinsing and repeating it, because yeah, our police force sucks. It sucks. It's not good enough. People don't feel safe with this police force. And I've said this before and I say it again. There is a minority of police out there that I know who do a good job, and I'm only speaking for those who I actually know, who actually are police officers and do a good job of it. But there are a vast majority of police officers who are letting us down, letting their areas down, letting themselves down. Everything that's supposed to be, you're supposed to be able to walk along the street and not worry about any kind of attacks or threats from you. I've noticed over the last 14 years how there are less officers on the streets than there used to be as well. There's just too many problems. About the story that I covered, the one that went viral, one of my stories that went viral, about the woman being forced to strip down to her underwear, right? People were constantly saying that she couldn't hack it. Well, you don't know that. Yeah? And not one person addressed the issue of the fact that that in her training, they literally put their foot on the back of her neck while she was doing press-ups. Am I the only one who thinks there's something wrong there? Like, hello? Like, what exactly is that? Explain to me how putting your foot on the back of someone's neck while doing push-ups or whatever the hell they were doing at the time, how is that supposed to help a police officer? Explain. In the comments. Come on, explain to me that. Because all the people who were complaining saying that this woman couldn't handle it or whatnot, yeah, not one of them could address that issue. Not one person in the comments addressed that issue in that video. It needs to be ripped apart and start again. It needs to be ripped apart and start again, the police force. No more of this reform crap. I'm sick of all this talk about reforming the police force. No. Start a new one from scratch. Work with councils, work with communities, work with bring in one or two experienced police officers, whether it's from outside the UK, from America, or from France, whatever. One or two in. Maybe bring one or two from original police force. Only one or two. And you literally, anyone else who comes into the police force, you start training them and you build this new police force. You build it from scratch. From scratch. And as you build up a brand new police force, they overtake. This is a long-term project idea that I've had. You build it up from scratch. And with new training, new innovations, new ideas, a new community in this police force, because it's not the same as the toxic, misogynistic, racist, oppressive behaviour police forces that we have now. And as this new force comes into play in where it is, you slowly drive down the old one. Whether it's severance packages, whatever, you get rid of all these officers and you get rid of the old police force and everything, that goes with it. All that misogynistic, racist, oppressive behaviour, hate. You get rid of all that crap. And then you end up having a police force that's a lot more aligned with what the public want. That's, in my opinion, how it should be done. Yes, I know it costs money. Yes, it will take time. But that is, I believe, is the approach that we need to go to now. I'm sick of all this talk about we've learned from our mistakes. We're sorry. We can do better. Like, it's all good when it's saying sorry when they've already dead or they've already been raped. Yeah, what's that going to do then? It's not going to do anything. It's not going to change and undo the damage that's already been done. Now, do you know what's also really infuriating? You want to know what's really infuriating? Yeah, is that there are volunteer groups out there in certain cities, volunteer community groups out there, who spend their time in groups of 10 to 20 of them, like older people, who go out at night to be there to look out for vulnerable women. And I think to myself that why is they doing that? They're doing that because women don't feel safe walking home at night at like 3-4 a.m. or whatever it is. And these groups that they have, some of these communities and groups and that they have out there, they do it so that they're there to watch out for people, to watch out for these vulnerable women. But it should not. But the thing is, and while I absolutely respect them for doing that, for being there for them, they should not have to be there for that. Just like, yeah, we shouldn't have food banks looking after us for feeding us, you know. It's another, for me, it's another position of the government failing to do its job. Don't worry about the cat. He's been fed. He's just being annoying. Anyway, rant over. Let's carry on, shall we? He also points, she added, he also points to the lack of oversight and accountability for these firearm officers as they act as a law unto themselves and the ongoing risk it poses to the public. They are incapable of reform and they need complete overhaul. Carl's comments were made in Beyond Cases Review, which had a whole section of MO19 and the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection, the PADP command where Coulson's worked. The review, which found the Met was institutionally racist, homophobic and misogynistic, said MO19 was dominated by cliques well connected to the senior officers in the Met and described the PADP as a dark corner of the force where poor behaviour can easily flourish. And this is the problem. This is why reform will not work for me. This is the added point of why I generally believe we are going round in goddamn bloody circles every time we talk about reform. On MO19, Casey added that there is a widely held view that firearm officers need to be allowed to bend or break the rules. One rule for them, one rule for another. Does that sound familiar to you? Her repeated calls for the PADP to be effectively disbanded and demanded improvement vetting in both units. She told the Met to re-evaluate all current officers using the new higher standards. The Met said last month it had begun reforming armed policing following Casey's report and made changes to the leadership and increased female representation on the PADP to 11% of the team. The number of complaints had dropped from a high of 467 in 2020 to 171 in 2023, though the data does not include the last 2 months of the last year. Open Democracy has also reported on allegations of racial bias and adultification after a 13-year-old boy playing with a water pistol was rammed off his bike, held at gunpoint and arrested by an MO19 officer in Hackney, East London last year. Yeah, I heard about this story and I was just like, jump into conclusions. The case is currently under investigation by the Directorate of Professional Standards, the Force's own department for dealing with complaints against officers. This needs to be separated. This needs to be independent. Force's own department of dealing with independence. Independent. No, they cannot manage themselves. Has to be done independently. Outside the control of the police officers. To hold police officers accountable for them, it has to be done independently, not by people within the police force. That needs to change. Kat Hobbs, spokesperson for the police monitoring group Netpol, told Open Democracy that the police complaints process is not fit for purpose and is staffed by ex-officers. It is all too often finds that racism, misogyny and violence are acceptable standards of behaviour for police officers, she added. Pointing to the arms officer who shot Duggan dead and was cleared of all wrongdoing in 2015, she asked, in which other job could you shoot someone, get away with it? It is clear from their behaviour that firearms officers are expect to be able to act with impunity. Kelsey Mohammed of Cradle Community, a campaign group calling for prison abolition, said Open Democracy figures show that London's biggest, most violent gangs continue to protect its members. She said that the murders of Cabba and Duggan are evidence that the police do not keep us safe. Accountability doesn't exist with an institution whose purpose is to maintain the racist, sexist status quo. Mohammed added that the investing in living conditions, education and healthcare, including mental health, is far more important for de-escalating violence than investing in firearms policing. A public inquiry into Everard's murder published its first report last week, calling for a radical overhaul of the police vetting system after finding the Met repeatedly failed to spot warning signs about Cousins. It found that Cousins should never have been an officer and that investigations into allegations had indecently exposed himself in 2015, 2020 and 2021 had been marred by police failures. And that was the thing as well. They knew on several occasions, they were warned on several occasions, and they never did the checking on the officer, but they still allowed him to keep his job, and it's ultimately cost someone's life. Never mind the fact that she was raped, which is a disgusting and abhorrent crime as it is. But I don't need what more I need to add about police, guys. I've said what I need to be said about it. It just really does grind my gears about how nowhere near enough work is being done. Nowhere near enough of it has been done, guys. So, guys, I got one more article for you guys. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, share across social media, and subscribe because it really does help support the channel. So this one is from Byline Times, guys. It's a bit of a, not really an article, but more of a just more of an argument opinion piece. But I still think it's an interesting one to say the least, guys. So why do trigger warnings make people so cross? It's funny that because I got triggered, didn't I, by certain comments from the last article. So trigger warnings are not the same as censorship, but the media uses them to stoke division in the culture war. Naeem O'Hagan argues in some nuisance in the debate. That is another thing as well. It's like certain comments, certain things that people say, whether it's a tweet that people make, whether it's what a YouTuber makes, whether it's a commentator, a political analysis makes on TV, or even just on the street. You know, certain things that are said to people can set off a trigger warning or set off a trigger in some people that makes them turns on that real can make them really, really upset. Just like I literally did about police. You know, I got triggered by that, didn't I? So certain things can trigger people, but certain sections of the media are using them to stoke division, and I 100% agree. The media is using them to stoke division in this so-called culture war, and it plays into conservatives' hands and certain people's hands as well. So, during a recent interview for Laura Queensberg's Sunday morning BBC show, Ralph Fiennes, an esteemed actor, director and producer for both film and theatre, currently starred in the production of Macbeth, was asked about trigger warnings and whether he felt audience have gone too soft. I think they have, yes, he responded. They are very disturbing scenes in Macbeth, terrible murders and things, he said, with Queensberg pointing out that the use had been banned from the current production. But I think the impact of theatre should be that you're shocked and that you should be disturbed. I don't think you should be prepared for those things, and when I was young, we never had trigger warnings. A week later on Queensberg's Sunday morning show, the actor Matt Smith was asked for these take and enthusiastically agreed. I worry sometimes that we're moving towards a sort of sanitised version of everything, where we've stripped the danger and the intervention and the integrity out of people, said Smith. Himself currently standing in the West End as an enemy of the people, isn't art meant to be dangerous? As somebody who likes certain sports and whatnot, you don't like knowing about a film and then knowing the full details of it and then watching the film, because then it takes away the fascination and the shock when a gasp moment happens or something that takes you off your feet. You know, you don't want that, really. It is tempting to dismiss Fiennes' comments as simply those in another grumpy, entitled older white man feeling threatened by someone which barely affects them, appearing when they appear to invoke the idea that simply because something didn't happen when he was young, it must be initially bad. But does he and Smith have a point? Clearly, on the face of it, they do. Their points about the needs and the rights and the arts to challenge its audience are perfectly validated, and in some high-profile performances, they may feel duty-bound to use their platforms to defend the rights of the arts to do this. But are trigger warnings really a thing that arts need protecting from? As first, we need to be clear about what we're actually talking about here. So there seems to be a conflation in many people's minds about trigger warnings and censorship. And of course, censorship is an enemy of art, but it's not clear what we're talking about. A trigger warning doesn't dictate or censor the context of any play, film or exhibit. Nobody is sitting at the side of a stage with a red felt pen, putting a giant X through the huge swathes of dialogue because they might upset members of the audience. They are simply there to make the audience aware that anything that may otherwise have forced them to unexpectedly relieve a past trauma. As an expert, I've never been the victim of sexual assault, but someone sat with or near me may have been. And it is the Krieg on stage, sorry I can't say that word, then I want to have been able to never have the opportunity to make an informal decision about whether to view such content beforehand. Now surely any reasonable person would want that same. In this instance, the trigger warning isn't aimed at me and is precisely has absolutely no impact on me, but has proved helpful for someone else. Faines and Smith points about theatre in and art in general having the right to be confrontational and dangerous, and to make its audience uncomfortable and in disputes, but trigger warnings aren't there to prevent this. If anything, they provide performers with more freedom to talk about difficult and challenging subject matters, in full knowledge that the audience has been forewarned. In real terms, it is hard to discern any meaningful differences between trigger warnings and the British Board of Film certificates which have been used for decades. Broadening the issue beyond the theatre into a wider cultural context, there is a genuine grown-up discussion that had to be around this. A recent screening of Mel Brooks' classic comedy Blazing Saddles on HBO Max redrew to a lengthy pre-screening context warning in which the film expert Jackie Stewart describes not only the frequent racist language in the script, but also the film's plot, theme, and even some spoilers. While the reaction to this cause was predictably hysterical, it's hard to watch without feeling talked down to. No audience wants to feel like they've been lectured or worse, invalidated. But samples like these are the exception rather than the norm. An A4 sign into the lobby of a theatre describing the potential trigger context isn't going to hamper the enjoyment of anyone. In fact, most people probably don't even notice it, because they aren't actively on the lookout for it. They may prove to be a useful tool for the small number of people who are actively looking for a sign. That's all they really are, a useful one which most people probably won't feel the need to use. But being upset about the pressures of trigger warnings is a bit upset, like being upset by the presence of disabled toilets. If you don't need them, they're not aimed at you, ignore them, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and let those that need to use them make use of them as they see fit. Faines spoke for barely a minute about trigger warnings over the course of his 9-minute interview with Queensberg's show. Aside from that topic, he talked about his anger over plans to build an energy hub in the Suffolk County countryside for twice as long, and became far more animated and impassionate, almost jumping out of his seat to make a point. If you watch the interview, you get the impression that this issue was far more important to him than one that he's been generating for most headlines. Their brief remarks about trigger warnings had been almost the only thing reported that they said. It's hard to summarise this for any other reason than the fact that they can be portrayed as decisive. Comments about the energy hubs and underfunding of the arts and rocketing ticket prices, the latter are both far more pressing than which Faines also spoke about, simply don't give as a good copy and can't be used to stoke the culture war. An update to the Arts Council English policy warning organisations it funds the wary of overly political and active statements, which came to days after Faines' interview. It is likely to be more of a far concern to artists and patrons. There are many things in the future that the arts in the UK, but trigger warnings are not one of them. I will say that it was an interest. This is an interesting piece. It was not what I was expecting. I will say when I read this, guys. I was expecting it to turn into more of a political context about it. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to take from that article. I would say it was an interesting one about, like, I was seeing it more as a trigger point of how certain sections of the media try to trigger us with certain headlines and certain comments. I thought that's kind of where the article was going, but it was staying within the the context of arts and theatre and how they basically try to get reactions out of people, and how they sometimes give too much of it away because they don't want to upset certain people for a political perspective and whatnot, which is what became kind of more what it was about. I very rarely go to the theatre myself, but my partner, who does do, who likes to, is part of one or two, shall we say, drama groups out there. It's something that I might actually have a discussion with her about. I know one or two other people who work in such sectors as well about the use of trigger warnings as well. Interesting one to say the least. I think I'll say on that. But yeah, what do you guys honestly think about that? Let me know in the comments section down below. And guys, just as I say that, we are reaching nearly an hour and a half almost here on Regan's Newsround. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's come along. I was not expecting it to go this long, but I guess one or two rants and talking points really did help come along this way. So what did you make of some of the articles and news stories that we covered today? We covered quite a lot. Talked a lot about the budget, judges, things on Labour, the Metropolitan Police, and then trigger warnings. What do you make of all these things? Let me know your thoughts about all these stories in the comment section down below. But just before you guys go, if you can do one more thing for me, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate. Share it across social media and hit that bell notification icon so you'll be notified when I upload another video. And subscribe because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to financially support me in the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content there as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.